Using a wood lathe is pretty simple. I'm going to give you some tips on turning with a wood lathe. I'm Dave Trowell with the Trowell Gallery, and a couple of tips I want to show you. We're going to start with some setup tips, and the first one is how to properly chuck up your piece so it's supported. We're going to talk about between centers turning first. Then we're going to talk about how to set up your tool rest. Then we'll talk about a couple of tips of actually turning your stock. Some of the things you'll need to work on a wood lathe is the lathe itself, your turning tools, some wood. Different woods turn easier than others. Today I'm going to be using mahogany. And you'll also need, for your finished product, some sandpaper and the finish of your choice. What we're going to do is we're going to start by putting our stock in the chuck, and this is a piece I've been working on. And I've taken the time to find the center of my stock and marked it and punched it on both ends. I'm going to use that to first bring it up onto the drive side of the chuck. Then I'm going to bring in my tail stock and line them up. Now you go ahead and lock down your tail stock, tighten it in, and lock it down. And now your stock is ready to turn. The next thing you need to do is to get your tool rest in the right position. What you want is to get your rest as close to your work as possible without actually touching. And what I like to do is get it close by eye and then give it a spin to make sure we're not going to touch anywhere, because you don't want your tool rest to touch your stock. And once I get it where I want it, I go ahead and lock it down. And the other thing you want to check is the height of your tool rest. You want to make sure it is right about the center line of your stock, maybe a little bit higher, just to give your gouges a good place to work from. Now that we have our stock mounted and our tool rest in place, we can go ahead and start turning our stock. You're going to start on a slow speed, and we're going to start with a gouge to get our basic shape. Once we have our piece round, we can go ahead and set up for our dimensioning. And if you're working off a drawing, you can get your dimensions, your distance from point to point. And it's a simple matter of you measure it over to where your point is, and then make a line on it, just a tick mark. And then we're going to turn on the lathe and use our pencil to make that line all the way around the piece. Once we have the distance marked out, we need to go ahead and set our depth. And we're going to do that with a parting tool. And that's a very simple process. We're actually going to bring the tool into contact with the stock and just feed it into our preset depth. And we'll check that distance with our calipers, which we'll set to the depth, the thickness that we need the stock to be. The next thing we're going to talk about is how to clean up your turnings. And here you can see we've got the shape pretty well roughed out, and we're going to use our skew or skew chisel to clean that up. And we're going to do that by bringing the lathe speed up a little bit higher, a little bit faster to get its cleaner cuts and work the shape and clean up all these rough cuts that you see. Okay, those are some basic tips on turning on the wood lathe. I'm Dave Trowell with the Trowell Gallery, the fine art of furniture making.